On the 25th of March, that is a week ago as I finished this script, OpenAI's Sam Altman announced an update to his company's ChatGPT and Sora products, allowing them to natively produce generative AI images, and during that announcement's livestream, he produced this image. The fact that the OpenAI model permitted users to generate art mimicking particular styles, above all the style of renowned Japanese animation house Studio Ghibli, spread across the internet like wildfire. People were Ghiblifying selfies, family photos, movies even. A redone version of the Fellowship of the Rings trailer went soft viral, claiming to imagine how a Ghibli Lord of the Rings film might look. And all this rose to such a fever pitch that a few days later, Altman himself was begging the internet to slow down. But why does it feel like there's something more to this fad than meets the eye? Why does that something feel so sinister? And what does all this mean for the future of AI, the future of Studio Ghibli, and the future of us? The beginnings of our answer lie in cultural theorist Walter Benjamin's landmark 1936 essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, which investigates the way then new mass media forms, and particularly film, were changing the ways humans engaged with art. See, the early 1900s saw the emerging medium of cinema take popular culture, especially popular visual culture, by storm. By the 1930s, the time in which Benjamin is writing, film had settled into this new dominant role, but the form and its particular formal logic hadn't yet been fully naturalized, weren't necessarily a given in the way they are today, were still, to writers like Benjamin, worth putting under the microscope on a fundamental level. What the worldwide embrace and commodification of this audiovisual hyper-edited, mass-duplicated form meant, what its artistic, sociological, and political ramifications might be, these were still open questions. And for Benjamin, a lot of the answers came down to aura. Aura is the unique character of an artistic experience, and the way that intersects with the experience's context or locale. It's the here and now of, for instance, an actor's performance. Picturing a theatre, the aura surrounding Macbeth on stage cannot, for the live audience, be detached from the aura that surrounds the actor playing him, Benjamin claims. But put that man in a studio and he's not acting for an audience, he's acting for a camera, and then that performance is chopped up and stitched back together invisibly by an editor. So perhaps the film as a whole will go on to exhibit a sort of aura itself, but thinking specifically about the actor's individual performance, something is lost, Benjamin claims, in the process of mechanical reproduction, that performance's particularity, and that particularity's unbrokenness, its connectedness to a particular environment, a particular locale, a particular aura. But the concerns of Benjamin's essay extend well beyond the walls of the cinema. Porco Rosso, written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki, is a 1992 animated film produced by Studio Ghibli, following Marco, a freelance pirate hunter in the skies over the Adriatic. He's also a pig. He's been cursed, so he's got a pig's head now. Around halfway through the movie, during a sort of pit stop in Milan, our porcine protagonist, now known mostly as Porco for obvious reasons, meets up in secret with his old pilot buddy Freire. The latter wants to tip off our hero that, owing to a whole bunch of trumped-up charges, treason, illegal entry, decadence, pornography, and being a lazy pig, the government has a warrant out for his arrest. "Come back to the Air Force," Freire offers. "I can still get you in." Porco responds with a line that's become iconic. Better a pig than a fascist. Because Porco Rosso is set at the tail end of the 1920s, so the Air Force? That's not just the Air Force, it's the Regia Aeronautica, and the government, that is, of course, Mussolini's government, the prototypical fascist regime. Porco Rosso takes place roughly 4 years after Il Duce had finished dismantling the country's democratic institutions and seizing dictatorial power, 5 or so before Mussolini's Roman Empire LARPing would lead to the brutal invasion of Ethiopia, 10 before that LARPing snowballed further into the invasion of Albania, and Italy signing the Pact of Steel with Nazi Germany. So yeah, better a pig than a fascist. Now that's a great line, but it isn't just a great line, obviously. It also tells us about our hero. Offered an easy life, he chooses his life, harder though it may be. Better to recognize himself a pig, better to stay himself, hold on to his own, warts and all, rough condition, even if it is considered an imperfect one, than to sand it down to conformity and throw in with the identikit, smoothed over models of the Italian Air Force, and the submission to a deluded, violent authority that smoothness represents. Porco Rosso was the first Studio Ghibli film I ever watched, and by all accounts, it's an odd candidate for that title. It's not one of the studio's most successful releases, either critically or commercially. Nor is it an obvious starting point chronologically. It's far from the first or the last feature film Studio Ghibli has produced. Online forum posts and listicles suggesting optimum get yourself into Ghibli viewing orders do not start with Porco Rosso. Some don't even include it at all. And while part of this may come down to quality, it probably is true that this is not the best movie the studio has ever made. I think part of it is down to the bizarre premise being seen as potentially off-putting. If you're trying to sell an unfamiliar Western viewer on these films as profound and moving art, I suppose I do understand the impulse to sweep the flying pig under the carpet. But personally, that instant wackiness is what caught my eye. Movie about an ace pirate hunter patrolling the Adriatic in the 1920s, and he's got a plane? And he's a pig? And it's called Porco Rosso? Sign me the fuck up. This was last year, and it's led to me watching a bunch more of these, to that experience trickling through into my work here on YouTube, and me being very excited to attend the Royal Shakespeare Company's production of My Neighbor Totoro next month. And all of that followed my being entranced by this bizarre premise. Well, bizarre is a little reductive here, but even in the context of the studio's previous work, Porco Rosso is out of left field, out of the box. It's not just idiosyncratic, a repetition of the house pattern, it's a new point on that pattern's plot. It's a demonstration of the way the house pattern is innovation, will never be complete, will always be expanding the box. It is emphatically not an averaging out of Miyazaki's prior output and the portfolios of other similar artists, and so it functions, among other things, as a perfect symbol for the way a company like Studio Ghibli is antithetical to generative AI, a technology that cannot expand the box, can only steal the box and copy what's inside. Back in 2016, Miyazaki was infamously shown a deep learning animation prototype, in some ways an early predecessor of modern generative AI video tools. The Studio Ghibli co-founder was, in his own words, utterly disgusted. One part of his response is particularly important.
Every morning, not in recent days, I see my friend who has a disability. It's so hard for him just to do a high five. His arm with stiff muscle can't reach out to my hand. Now, thinking of him, I can't watch this stuff and find it interesting. Whoever creates this stuff has no idea what pain is.
Miyazaki's revulsion does not come from disliking the appearance of the demo, nor is his complaint chiefly a practical one. He is not worried here about the impact of developments like this on the market for animation. Primarily, what disgusts him is the disconnect between the model and what's being modeled, the way the signifiers of pain have been reproduced by a system entirely separate from the experience of pain. In a word, then, the problem is aura. This performance of visceral fleshiness has no locale. It's because of the context of Miyazaki's life, because he has experienced unique instances of this referent in those interactions with his friend, because part of what's being attempted here has touched him before, has meant to him, that he's able to perceive the lack of that aura here. That an experience so fundamentally human should be attempted through this unfeeling a rendering process is profane to Miyazaki. Moreover, that nobody else sees this, that they thought the animator would like it, only compounds the matter. Miyazaki sums his feelings up in one final line.
I strongly feel that this is an insult to life itself.
The work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction ends with an afterword. Benjamin contextualizes the discussion within the tide of fascism then sweeping through the world. For Benjamin, the heart of this tide is the way fascism seeks to organize the newly emergent proletarianized masses without touching the property relations that those masses are so urgently trying to abolish. The way fascism gives something to the downtrodden masses, but via an ideological sleight of hand, the wrong thing, not the fix for their pain, but a megaphone pointing outward and down through which to express that pain. And crucially, the idea that this expression, outward and down, is the fix.
Fascism leads logically to an aestheticization of political life. The violation of the masses corresponds to the violence exercised by a film camera, which fascism enlists in the service of producing cultic values.
Benjamin's point here is not that every filmmaker is a fascist, obviously. Rather, he's observing that the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction is more vulnerable than ever to a sort of manipulation, an invisible stripping away of connectedness and proper context, and that fascist politics rely on a similar mechanism. In a sense, the aura of capitalist alienation is broken and its energy redirected, the target shifted away from capital and toward outgroups. When people talk about fascism as a politics of aesthetics, it's this idea they're developing. Leaders selling solutions that only function as such on an aesthetic level. That is, as Brooks Turner puts it in an article for MN Artists, in a way that feels true but is not verifiable. For Benjamin, the final culmination of this is imperialist war. Nothing else performs national unity, gives the idea of accomplishment to the masses on quite the same scale, and he illustrates this with reference to Italy's aforementioned invasion of Ethiopia, the same one Porco's old pilot buddies would have been committing atrocities in just a few years after that movie wrapped up. But today, we can consider the all-too-familiar right-wing crusades to stop the illegal boats. The reality is that you apply for asylum inside a country, so the vast majority of people on the boats are going the legal route, and even if your line goes up poisoned, immigration tends to be a net economic good anyway. Or consider the calls to bar trans women from quote-unquote real women's spaces for safety reasons. Despite trans people being overwhelmingly more likely to be the victims of assault than the perpetrators, these are gestures that stand in for meaningful solutions, and nothing more. Destruction of aura as the basis of fascist semiotics is an idea borne out by a lot of historical fascist art, even beyond the film camera. In 1937, the year after Benjamin wrote that essay, the Nazis hosted two parallel exhibitions in Munich, the Ausstellung Entarte Kunst and the Großdeutsche Kunstausstellung. The former was a showcase of so-called degenerate art, that is, anything modernist, anything seen as decadent, impure, anything held to contain subversive ideas. For a modern parallel, think of the woke games database. It's basically that same selection process here too. The latter, in English, the Great German Art Exhibition, was a mirror showcase of Nazi-approved arts, paintings depicting racial purity and hierarchical obedience, nudes exalting idealized blonde bodies. Some of these pieces were technically proficient, but the strict and strictly conservative requirements for approval naturally limited the possible uniqueness, the possible aura of this bland, sanded-down style. Smoothness over roughness, reproduction over aura, fascist over pig. But don't take my word for it, historian Klaus Fischer characterizes the Nazi style as colossal, impersonal, and stereotypical, in which people became mere emblems expressive of assumed eternal truths, were shorn of all individuality. That is, any semblance of aura fascist art may have possessed came from its shocking severance of aura, the way a cherry-picked selection of old, prestigious forms and images were lifted from their locales, garishly repurposed and reoriented, not to mean, but to say, to give answers and display ideals. Like fascist politics then, fascist art is little more than the appearance of art, exhibitions crammed with pieces that stand in for spirit. One essential addendum to the tale of the two Kunstausstellungen is the fact that the degenerate exhibition was by far the more popular of the two. Nazi-approved art isn't just boring with the benefit of hindsight, it was boring then too. Seeing this, though, the Nazis simply shuttered the popular degenerate exhibition and carried right on populating Germany with state-approved aesthetics. Because if your art isn't meant to mean, is only meant to say, you don't need people to like it. You just need them to see it. The trend of Ghibli posting was still in its infancy when a new account joined in. The White House. At White House quote-tweeted an earlier post bragging of the capture of a crying woman, Virginia Besores Gonzalez, supposedly a fentanyl trafficker arrested by ICE upon re-entering the United States, but honestly at this point, who even knows if that's true, with a new image, seemingly a generation from the new OpenAI model based on a prompt describing the first post's photo and requesting a rendering in the Studio Ghibli style. The online response to this Ghibli posting trend has been split. Many, particularly those less clued into AI discourse, thought the whole thing was a bit of harmless fun, but many others were horrified. After all, Miyazaki's disgust at that deep learning animation is famous the world over. Personally, if there is anything positive about this trend, I think that is, to quote a TechCrunch headline, the way OpenAI's viral Studio Ghibli moment highlights AI copyright concerns. The silver lining of the Ghibli filter fad is its foregrounding of the plagiaristic element present in all modern generative AI products. That TechCrunch article quotes an IP lawyer as saying that while a studio's house style is not explicitly protected by copyright, it's plausible that OpenAI achieved this likeness by training on Studio Ghibli's films, which are. Viewed generously, this phrasing is that lawyer and TechCrunch being diplomatic. Viewed less charitably, it's them being cowardly. That OpenAI have trained their models on Ghibli's filmography is not merely plausible, it's practically a certainty. It's an open secret that AI houses train their models on mountains of copyrighted materials, and in my opinion, the tech media's commitment to pretending otherwise or downplaying that fact approaches journalistic malpractice. It's true that training models on copyrighted material is a legal grey area for now, but it's also true that it's becoming less of a grey area as the months go by. At least one recent case has seen federal judges rule that AI model training does not constitute fair use of copyrighted material. You know, obviously. But legality aside, this, the very overdetermined example of OpenAI's new Ghiblifying model, highlights the process at play behind even the more generic, more sanded down AI image outputs. A process of invisible editing and garish repurposing on an unthinkably massive scale. So many of the files these models have churned through were pieces of art spirited away from their proper contexts. In Studio Ghibli's case, that context being each frame's particular situation in their shots, their scenes, their movies, and the unique artistic experience that emerges from that connectedness. In a sense, every AI-rendered image or video is constructed from the severed ghosts of a million works, a million locales, a million particularities. This is the work of art in the age of generative reproduction. This is the exponential shearing of individuality, the exponential destruction of aura, the exponential production of fascist sensibility art. When describing reactions to the AI Ghibli fad, I mentioned that many people were horrified and many were naively excited. What I didn't mention is that many were excited precisely because they recognized this anti-humanistic, authoritarian undercurrent. The White House's animeifying led to a whole wave of copycat generations, seeking to replicate the cruel irony of rendering strongman xenophobia in the visual language of the famously empathetic, famously pacifist Studio Ghibli. It is perhaps worth noting that, as one article on this whole situation from The Verge points out, the right were not quite unified in this. It points to the objection of one prominent Silicon Valley conservative, that is, Mike Solana, one of Peter Thiel's many big tech acolytes, who worries the model has rendered the woman in too sympathetic a manner. But whether his objection is any real sort of aesthetic hang-up with the image, or simply a moment of self-aware unease at quite how far and how fast his side are willing to say the quiet part out loud, as that Verge article writes, the White House's clear goal was a familiar kind of extremely online performative sadism, it's kind of beside the point. Sure, some see a pathetic figure here, others see a sympathetic one, but None are seeing Virginia Besoris Gonzalez. All are seeing an emblem attempting to express a universal truth. All are seeing through the eyes of a fascist, not a pig. She is made less than a person. This is not art that means. This is art that says. That is what it's saying, and we're all seeing it. That Verge article is squirrely in the same way a lot of reporting on this moment has been. It notes the White House's goal, notes that goal's clarity, but still maintains AI Ghibli and Trump fit together bizarrely, still frames the post as a gaffe, since no reasonable person defends jokey national public humiliation of what appears to be a fairly low-level immigration detainee as good governance. The article does go on to note the thing uniting America's tech leadership and political leadership, an ideology of domination, the principle that strength, money, and authority are all best wielded by bluntly forcing others to do what you want, but it seems to forget that we do have a word for that. In his article, AI, the New Aesthetics of Fascism, discussing the global right-wing embrace of this new form, Gareth Watkins connects the dots.
That even the best AI models are not fit to be used in any professional context is largely irrelevant. The selling point is that their users don't have to pay, and more importantly interact with, a person who is felt to be beneath them, but upon whose technical skills they'd be forced to depend.
So Mike Solana was right about one thing: this is a form OpenAI and the White House didn't earn, but that was the point. To use generative AI art in any professional or political context is implicitly to signal an utter contempt for labor. The absence of humans is a feature, not a bug. Watkins continues.
It can produce art the way right-wingers like it. Thomas Kincaid paintings, soulless DreamWorks 3D cartoons, depthless imagery that yields only the reading that its creator intended.
AI-generated images are born without aura, born all but gagged, able to say one thing and one thing alone. The cruelty is the point. Discussing the seemingly spontaneous OpenAI Ghibli trend, Brian Merchant points out in a post at Blood in the Machine that
Sam Altman, OpenAI's CEO, not only participated, changing his X-avatar to a Ghiblified self-portrait, but insisted that this was the plan all along. Just about everyone in the AI world knows Miyazaki is adamantly against AI, and they're doing these memes anyway. Or worse, because they know he'd hated it. When I tweeted about Miyazaki's AI criticism on X, I am still getting, lots of replies like who cares what he thinks or even fuck Miyazaki. Sam Altman certainly knows of Miyazaki's stand on AI, and he's encouraging the trend anyway.
There often seems to be a tension between the right's attempts to crush art and artists, and their seeming desire to possess art and artistry for themselves. It's tempting to frame this issue as jealous hypocrisy, Ben Shapiro syndrome. Look, they all just wanted to be painters this whole time. And that framing isn't necessarily wrong, but it does miss the bigger issue, does miss the fact that there is no tension here at all. As Paulo Freire observed in his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, that only the few, the haves, the in-group are full human beings is an assumption baked deep into the culture of any oppressor class. As a result, the whole of humanity and human creativity belongs to them as an exclusive right, and any humanization of others, for instance via their artistic endeavors, appears not as the pursuit of full humanization, but as subversion. Freire goes on to point out that this is a self-sustaining cycle. The more the oppressors control the oppressed, the more they change them into apparently inanimate things. That is, the more creativity is stolen and dominated, the less human the many, the have-nots, the outgroups and their creatives appear, and the less that stealing and domination even registers as transgression. There is no tension between the oppressor's drive to control art and to crush it, because it was never about art, always about who gets to be a person and who doesn't, whose life is denied. A century ago, Benjamin drew a link between fascism's aestheticized politics and the destruction of aura by art's technological reproduction. 10 years ago, and as we've seen, for similar reasons, Miyazaki called an early predecessor of AI art an insult to life itself. Today, Watkins' article picks this thread up. AI art is anti-humanist, entirely nihilistic.
If art is the establishing or breaking of aesthetic rules, then AI art, as practiced by the right, says that there are no rules but the naked exercise of power by an in-group over an out-group. It says that the only way to enjoy art is in knowing that it is hurting somebody.
An awful lot has changed in the field of deep learning generative graphics since 2016, but perhaps nothing more than this. Now, the people simulating humanity do know what pain is, and they want us to feel it. An insult to life itself. What better aesthetic for a death cult? At the start of this video, I called Walter Benjamin a cultural theorist, but he was also something of a theologian. Much of the German Jewish writer's ostensibly secular work draws on the concepts and idioms of Jewish mysticism, even as it operates within the framework of Marxism. As his discussion of the term begins with reference to pre-modern meaning as derived from worship and ritual, the work of art as an instrument of magic, aura itself may be an example of this, may derive its own meaning, its own uniqueness from this locale. There's something powerful in the idea that Benjamin may have built tools attempting to understand and perhaps even forestall fascism from his own Judaism. In the end, though, it wasn't enough. That goal was simply beyond the reach of a then unknown author writing in exile. Benjamin died in 1940, trying to escape the Nazi advance into France and the camps that would claim his brother's life 2 years later, the camps that saw fascism's aestheticization of politics reach its terrible culmination. In a way, Benjamin predicted this too, in concept if not in scope. His essay ends noting the depersonalizing effect of the new chemical weapons, claiming imperialistic war machines like Italy's had found in gas warfare a new way of doing away with aura. The inflicting of death, of mass death, had become impersonal, disconnected as never before. Today, though, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction is an unknown text no longer. Due to posthumous efforts on the part of friends and admirers like Theodor Adorno and Gershom Scholem, Benjamin's oeuvre is now known and studied the world over, with this particular essay at the heart of a great many modern courses in literature or media studies. Moreover, we can very regularly see elements of his argument echoed by writers and creatives across fields and across the world. Benjamin's words, along with those of his like-minded peers and successors, give us something. Not a megaphone, but a spyglass, pointed not down, but up, to power, and to power's interaction with new forms of technology. Whether or not that's enough now is up to us. OpenAI and the White House's perverse use of Studio Ghibli's style is a power move, is an attempt to display superiority. On that, I agree with Blood in the Machine, but I don't think Merchant is right to end his article with worries about the slopification of Studio Ghibli. The idea he quotes that AI is eating away at part of what makes Studio Ghibli's work so special, that Ghibli is now inextricably tied to slop due to this trend. I truly feel that the studio's legacy and future are not endangered by this, primarily because generative AI art, even generative AI art passed through a kawaii filter, still sucks donkey balls. The Ghibli Lord of the Rings trailer dub that had all the AI bros fawning looks like shit, flat and depthless, nearer the rotoscoped style of Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings than of Studio Ghibli, and even then, there's none of Bakshi's sense of dynamism, or of his uniquely dreamy composition. If you think that these Ghibli-fying models' outputs are shots in any way comparable to those of the animators themselves, you are not actually looking at either thing. Seeing imitations, even shoddy ones, of the Ghibli style doesn't activate the happy neurons in our brains because a tool's done well in approximating an inherently substantive, high-quality form. It does so because we're recalling all the times we've seen this style used well, as one constituent part of a unique, connected, artistic experience. It's the interplay of frames in a shot, the interplay of shots in a scene, and the interplay of visuals, writing, performance, and sound design that creates the Ghibli aura. And without such an interplay, this style never would have been beloved or notable enough to warrant this horribly expensive imitation. And it is horribly expensive. OpenAI is hemorrhaging billions of dollars every year without any clear path to profitability, and they are losing further money on every Ghiblified generation, even if you're paying for an exorbitantly priced membership. Even as Altman brags about the numbers of new Ghiblifying users, this trend will have done incalculable amounts of further financial damage to OpenAI's bottom line. Potentially, this fact, together with that aforementioned looming spectre of legal consequences for the plagiarism that all these models have always relied on, provides the final piece of the White House post's puzzle. That is, whatever backdoor relationship this post speaks to between the Trump administration and OpenAI may well be the result of Altman realizing there is no feasible private sector future for a business as non-functional as his. Perhaps OpenAI's future is as a state-backed tool, a new Großdeutsche Kunstausstellung, able to continue this destruction of aura to, as Watkins puts it, flood the zone with bullshit indefinitely. But returning to the matter at hand, this is a power move using Studio Ghibli, but the studio itself will escape that power. The fact that Studio Ghibli seems to be more or less winding down, at least compared to their rate of production in prior decades, has nothing to do with the risk of being overshadowed by a glorified autocorrect, and everything to do with wider shifts in the entertainment business and the fact that their key creative voices are now either octogenarians or deceased. And this wave of dead images poses no threat to their legacy. Kakatu is right to state that OpenAI's glorified Studio Ghibli filter won't create anything memorable, because how could it? Like Porco himself, Ghibli will be fine. There is a cove somewhere that no power can reach. There is a hotel overlooking the deep blue of the Adriatic where these films will always live, their auras intact, shining almost unbearably bright. We can take solace in that, but we must also realize that we are not in the cove, and we're not at Gina's hotel either. No, we're back on the mainland, and the 1930s are here. Thanks for watching. Don't go anywhere for a second though, couple things. First, I want to thank Chariot for some very helpful script notes, whose channel you should definitely check out. I believe she's got a longer piece coming out any day now, which you'll very likely enjoy if you dug this one. And second, in I think the spirit of this video, I want to shout out an upcoming project from two other friends of the channel. King's Creek is a spooky narrative podcast created by TSD Talks and Kai After Kai, premiering on the 16th of April, with episodes releasing weekly thereafter. We follow Damien Barkman as he reads through his late uncle's research documenting the strange and paranormal occurrences in the town of Kings Creek, Washington. Think Twin Peaks meets Gravity Falls by way of the Magnus Archives. I myself don't know a ton about where the story's going, but the few bits I have heard so far are mysterious and intriguing, and the vibe is immaculate. There's a trailer out now, which I'll link in the description, and if this sounds like your thing, it'll be available on YouTube as well as all your standard podcast services. I, for one, will be bumping the premiere come the 16th because I think supporting the passion projects of talented people is cool and good. And finally, speaking of support, I will of course close this out by saying a huge thank you to all of my backers on Patreon and YouTube, especially Hanan, Daniel Goldhorn, Something Something Capitalism Bad, Thomas R, and Weirdy Beardy, without whom videos like this one, and the significantly longer one coming later this month, simply would not exist. See you then, I guess.